Wildlife biologist and host of the TV show Ocean Mysteries, Jeff Corwin, is in Washington. Jeff, what do you make of this just tragic and horrible situation?
It's just such a terribly tragic event. It's heartbreaking. It's gut-wrenching. It's also a very rare event. Keep in mind that millions of people visit Disney every year. Many of them are frolicking, enjoying themselves. They're one of the most secure places on the planet. And this has never happened before, but it's just terribly tragic.
Yeah, it certainly is. And why hasn't it happened before? Why doesn't it happen more frequently? What sort of measures are in place to keep alligators away?
Anne-Marie, that's a good question. Well, first of all, you have to look at the odds of this really happening. Alligators normally don't target human beings. We're not in the menu. We're not in the food chain for these animals. Alligators are eating fish. They're eating small mammals like raccoons or deer or turtles. So this is a very rare event. Now, normally in a place like Disney World, it's very hard for them to keep alligators from migrating and saturating aquatic areas like this, even though it's a man-made lagoon. Because we have to remember, surrounding this lagoon, thousands and thousands of acres of Disney property, many of which is ideal alligator habitat. So their strategy is to look for big animals that they think have a potential risk, and when they find those big animals, they remove them. This was, as I have heard, not a gigantic alligator. I'm hearing between 4 feet, 5 feet, not a typical candidate for attacking a human being, but again, this was a child.
Jeff, you know, I think for most of us who have watched shows like yours and other nature shows, we've seen alligators in the wild dragging in baboons, deer, other kinds of animal. Can you explain then how a 4-foot alligator would snatch a child? We understand it happened at about 9:30, or at least that's when the calls came into emergency services.
Right, Vlad. Well, keep in mind that alligators are opportunistic predators, which mean they will eat whenever there's a chance to eat. But primarily they hunt at night. They're nocturnal. And what's so amazing about these creatures is that even a gigantic alligator, 12, 13 feet in length, when it's in predatory mode, Vlad, most of its body is invisible. It's literally colored like the water. It's underwater, only its eyes are above the surface. It can see beautifully in the dark. It hones in on its predator, and then it ambushes. For short distances, windows of time, it can move shockingly fast. And that's what happened here. He saw the splash of the child near the water's edge, and it went right into predatory mode. An adult human being, this animal likely would not have targeted. But a small 2-year-old child, it kind of, you could see how this could happen in this very disastrous situation.
Yeah, Jeff, you know, I've seen one of the things I asked the spokesperson there for the security or the police was about lighting, because I have seen when there are alligators or even crocodiles, for example, in Australia, wildlife experts will shine a flashlight in the water, and that is when you can see the eyes light up. That's the only thing that you see, and that's why I was curious about lighting in the area. That would really be the only hint for someone that there was an alligator in the water.
And even then, and Vlad, what you touched on is that lighting. It's called spotlighting. That's how you find an alligator if you're an alligator biologist and you know what you're doing, or you're an alligator hunter or something. And by the way, only if you are directly behind that beam can you see the alligator's eyes. You have to have a clear shot from eye to eye. If you're 4 feet away, if you're 5 inches away, you will not see those illuminated eyes because you're not in direct line of sight.
We had heard that the little boy's father tried to jump in and tried to save him, and we're also hearing that this has shifted to a recovery effort now. I'm wondering, is there anything that the boy's father could have done? And I know we're talking about a small alligator, but they can be pretty strong too.
By the way, a 4-foot alligator is maybe, or 5-foot alligator is maybe small when we think of a large predator. If you're not an alligator expert, I can't think of anything more terrifying than being in the water with a predatory alligator. I don't care how big it is. I think this father did everything he could. I think he went in to that fight mode. He basically was going to do whatever he could to save his son. But here's the thing, even a small alligator, it's almost impossible to open their jaws. They have what's called an abductor muscle, and it, as it closes, delivers thousands and thousands of pounds per square inch. It's like a vice. You couldn't open it. A 5-foot animal, even more impossible. I can't imagine what more he could have done. So tragic.
And Jeff, so to Anne-Marie's question, I mean, these kinds of predators, they're not prone to once you shock them, once you hit them, once you try to attack them, that they're surprised and suddenly they let go of the prey. That doesn't happen here.
That actually can happen. That has happened. We've seen that, for example, in Africa with hippos and crocodiles. Now crocodiles, a crocodile will move in and go for baby hippo. Hippo can actually snap a crocodile in half, and sometimes will scare that animal off the prey. Yes, that can happen. But a lot of times, once it's locked on, gators and crocodiles, they'll often compete with each other over food and going to what's called a rolling effect. I think this father did everything he could. It is so tragic. I'm seeing a lot of people on Twitter saying that they did something wrong. They were at Disney World, the safest place on the planet, watching fireworks, tickling their toes in the water. You know, it's just a tragedy.
So then it sort of begs the question, and maybe you don't have enough information to answer this, though. Does Disney World do enough? And, you talk about that this is an area where crocodile or alligators, rather, are going to flock to this area. Maybe they should have done more?
What more could they do? I mean, it's how do you prevent grass from growing on your lawn? Or you can go for that dandelion, but there'll still be dandelions there. Amazingly, alligators 40 years ago were critically endangered. They almost became extinct, but they have recovered, and there's ideal habitat there. The best plan and course of management for them is to look for those big animals that they deem a threat, but they still find their way in there. You always see, Anne-Marie, those shots of this really safe, sterilized golf course with a giant dinosaur-like gator going from one tee to the next. So it would be impossible to prevent alligators from living there. Florida is a very wild, dynamic place, and it is home to alligators.
Jeff Corwin, thank you so much for sharing your
Thanks.
thoughts on this just horrible incident. We appreciate it.